Hello, you guys. Can you see me okay? Welcome to our weekly Friday live stream. We are going to be talking about our ancient Greeks article. We're going to continue kind of going over that. We were here on Wednesday. We got together on Wednesday because my wonderful drum arrived. You can see it in the background there. It is just so cool. You know what? I think I might grab it and just play a little drum for you while people arrive. One sec. Let's see. I've just been having so much fun with this drum. Isn't this the most beautiful thing? I don't know if I've shown you. Hey, Michael. Look at this, how, like, the detail of this. You've got the face and the corn in the four directions with this blazing, beautiful golden, whatever that is around it. Um, Manika, thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you. And I love the spirals. This is an ancient symbol. You know, the spirals are found all over the world, especially in England, the ancient ruins in the United Kingdom area, Ireland, Scotland, Britain, and the birds flying. I just love it so much. So why don't we, I'm going to sit here and play a little bit for you, and then we will get started. Hey, Krister. Hey, Krister. Krister, happy midsummer. I saw your comment. And yes, midsummer. I was thinking about actually on the 21st, waking up early and playing to the sunrise to welcome the light back, you know, into my life and my family's life. But anyway, so, you know, using the drum to create this, you know, peaceful, meditative space is so great. Why don't we just have a moment to connect together, all of us? And then we're going to have a fabulous little discussion on the ancient Greeks. Continuing that article, we're going to read that and have some Italian sparkling water, talk about some thoughts from lessons from the week, and just have a fabulous time as we always do together. So here we go. So anyway, we're all called together now. We're all here together in this lovely space. I just love this drum. Um, what's been neat is yesterday in my practice, I had a moment of playing through some of my medieval music that I've been, in love with, and I recorded myself playing that, and then I was able to kind of do a drum beat in the background, which was so neat. Cantiga 166 has this interesting rhythm. And I realized I can do this interesting, like, little. It's just so fun. So I would recommend that you get a drum. If you don't have one already, they are just so cool. It's nice. It's definitely nice. I've been, when you listen to the news and not that I really spend all day listening to the news, but when you feel a little bit stressed or freaked out by things, or nervous or anything, spending just 1 minute here with this kind of pulse, it like gives you some courage in your heart, in your stomach, in yourself. It just kind of somehow gives you a little courage. And I feel like a drone does that too for when we're playing. Having that lovely cello drone or some kind of pitch to kind of give you a stability against everything that you're doing is just so wonderful. So if you're not already, and it also, I mean, has a myriad of great reasons to use a drone as a musician, especially as a violinist or violist. But when you have a drone there, not only does it give you some stability for the harmony, um, but it also helps you really with your ear training, making sure that you're hearing what you're creating against the drone, which is just fabulous. So anyway, lots of love from the drum to you guys. I'm gonna go pop this down and then we're gonna have some Italian sparkling water and just catch up a little bit. There we go. Can you guys see this okay? I want you to be able to see it. All right. Well, I found this wonderful citrus blend sparkling mineral water, and it says it's from Italy. So we're going to have a little bit of this. It says citrus blend, and it says with organic flavors. Here's the back for any of you that are interested. I like Pellegrino with a little lemon or some lime or something, but this one has its own little flavoring. So how about I move this closer here and we can pour this together. You guys been doing okay in the world? Are you all right? All right in the world? Hopefully this doesn't fall over. This might fall over. I might not be able to keep this like this. I'm just getting used to this new little iPad. Let's see. Trying to get it so that you can see kind of what I'm doing here. Okay, cheers, my dears. Cheers, cheers. It's Friday. It is Friday. This is just some sparkling mineral water, but it has a little citrus flavoring. It's got some little, isn't that wonderful? It's so great. So I wish if you were here, I would definitely pour you a glass. Cheers. Cheers, my dears. It's a very light flavor. I can almost barely taste the flavoring at all. It might be because I put ice in here. Yeah, I can't actually taste the flavors at all with that, but that's totally fine. There's another one they have which is really nice. It's called elderflower and mint. That's delightful. That one has a lovely flavor. So, gotta stay hydrated in the summer. You guys gonna do anything for the summer solstice on the 21st? It's a fabulous day. So I was thinking that I would wake up early. My other half and I would go down to the park, and there's this little platform you can sit on. I was just thinking I would bring the drum and we can have like this fabulous welcoming the light ceremony in the morning. The problem is the park is close to, places. I mean, there's houses kind of around, so I would be afraid of, at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning, whatever it is, that I would be waking up everybody in the neighborhood with my drum. That would be probably not very nice, especially because I think it's the Sunday. The 21st is on Sunday. But if you don't know, because we're talking about all this ancient stuff, you probably know a lot of the ancient, probably all, let's just like go out there on a limb and say maybe most of them, if not all, ancient structures are astronomically aligned to these specific solar things, especially the summer solstice, the winter solstice, the equinoxes. Because it's so magical to be able to see our universe creating this beautiful moment, the longest day, the longest night, the season changes would have been so important to our ancient history and our ancient, ancestors. I did create I did create a song to the ancestors. My ancestors are, I haven't taken a DNA test at all, but just from my family's history that we know, we have family. A large portion of our family is from Holland, the Hague area, and the other portion is from England and Scotland, maybe Ireland. So that's my heritage. And I guess I'd have to have a DNA, thing to confirm that. But so I created a song to my ancestors on the drum, and it's kind of a funny. It's ridiculous. I almost am like that like I almost scared to share it with you because it's just so crazy. But it's called the Cup of Tea song. So, and it is dedicated to my British ancestors. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump into this article? For the past few weeks, we have been reading through this article together on the ancient Greeks and their thoughts on music. So look how beautiful this tree is. We went for a walk in the woods and there's this beautiful, beautiful tree. I don't know what kind of tree it is, um, but it's just gorgeous. So, so beautiful. So let me see here. The article is called Plato and Aristotle on the Ends of Music. And I'm going to link this in the description. Although, if you'd like to follow along, my other live streams, not the one from the drum on Wednesday, but the other live streams have this article linked at the bottom, I think. So it's called Plato and Aristotle on the Ends of Music, and it's by Mary B. Schoen-Nazaro. So we're just reading through this together. This is a paper about that, and it's 14 pages, and I think that we are on like page 8 or 9. The only problem with drinking bubbly water is it's going to make me burp. So that's going to be fun. Okay, let me just clean my glasses off real quick and then we will jump into this article. The ancient Greeks teach us that the greatest musicians were not only, they didn't necessarily have to be technical geniuses on the instrument. They could make us feel anything, though. They could create an emotion behind whatever it was that they were doing, however simple it was, or however complicated it was. It wasn't just about being the flashiest, person or showing off your technical facility. It was about sharing and communicating an emotion behind it. And that is the magical thing that music can do, isn't it? So, okay, let's see here. Let me see. I'm looking at the end of page 8. This is perfect. We kind of touched on this last week. This is the end of, I think, where we were talking about last week. So this is the end of page 8 here. According to Aristotle, music imitates the emotions because, like the emotions, it is a principle of movement on the sense level. He describes how different kinds of music move us in different ways according to the emotion imitated. The musical, and there's a quote here that, oh, Sylvia, yay, you're here. I was wondering where you were. Thank you for being here. Oh, J-Swad, definitely do 23andMe. You may be surprised. Yes, I think that would be an interesting thing to do for sure, for sure. Okay, so this is a little quote, I think, from Aristotle's own writings. The musical modes differ essentially from one another, and those who hear them are differently affected by each. For those of you that don't know, a musical mode is like you were having a virtual networking session. I hope that went well, Sylvia. I hope that went well. A musical mode is kind of like a scale. It's just that the ancient Greeks didn't have major and minor scales like we do today. They had 7 different modes, and they all were like they were all, 7 notes and they all have a different story behind them. So they're going to talk about that in just a second. They have a different feel behind them. So some of them make men sad and grave, like the so-called Mixolydian mode. Others enfeeble the mind, like the relaxed modes. Another again produces a moderate and settled temper, which appears to be the peculiar effect of the Dorian. A lot of music is in the Dorian mode. A lot of the medieval music and folk music. And apparently that produces a moderate and settled temper. That's the Dorian mode. The Phrygian inspires enthusiasm. These same principles apply to rhythms. Some have a character of rest, others of motion. And of these latter again, some have a more vulgar, others a more nobler movement. So we could explore that with the drum for sure. That's interesting. Rhythm and harmony, they go together. That's actually how I've been talking with my student. We've been with the whole studio about just really, like, we've been really, really studying how rhythm and harmony go together. The rhythm's that skeleton, and then on top of the skeleton, you have the notes and the harmony, and they all just, when you put those together, it fleshes it out. It creates more of an emotional understanding of how to interpret the rhythms, which is kind of fun. Very interesting and so creative, because we all are going to interpret them slightly differently. So that's why one person plays one thing differently from the other person, even though it's the same thing. Music sets up a proportion between its own movement and that of the listener. Through music, a harmony arises between the sound and the soul of the listener, and he is moved. This movement is so close to our own emotional movement that, as Aristotle points out, some people identify music in the soul. From what Aristotle says about the power of music to move the listener in harmony with itself, it follows that the skillful musician, this is what we're talking about, will be able to reproduce almost any emotion so that it can be felt and recognized by the listener. He will be able to make him melt with tenderness or bristle with rage. Even the most hardened heart will reverberate if the right string is plucked. This is what imitating emotion entails. And to just pause for a second, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is that we are also an instrument and we're so sensitive. We're really, really sensitive to sound and even how people say things, or even just the sounds around us, the music around us, but just sounds around us. Like imagine if you had to listen to like a jackhammer all day. Funny comment. Thank you. um, what was I saying? You distracted with my train of thought. Okay, yes. So we are sensitive to sounds, whether they're music or whether they're just crazy random sounds like a jackhammer. If you had to listen to that all day, how would you feel by the end of the day? Probably, like if it was the whole day, you would be not happy with that, right? You might be like irritable, you might be like on edge, you might be like losing your mind a little bit. So um, when we're studying music, one of the things I'm noticing is that if we can decide on the page, this is a happy piece or this is a sad piece, those are my two only vocabulary words to describe emotion, happy and sad, um, then it would actually be helpful for us as the first instrument to try to feel that. That way we can know how to convey it. So if you're playing a happy song that even has like a danciness to it, it would be helpful if you could like move and try to feel that feeling of happiness. And then when you go to interpret that through your other instrument, the instrument, um, it might be like it might come through a little bit more genuinely, or you might actually get inspiration of how to convey it even more effectively. If you know what it feels like to be happy and you know what it feels like to move around. So, like the energy behind the movement. Okay. Music sets up a proportion between its own movement and that of the listener. Through music, a harmony arises between the sound and the soul of the listener, and he is moved. This movement is so close to our own emotional movement that, as Aristotle points out, some people identify music in the soul. I think I read this already. Oh, I've read this, sorry. Keep on going. Aristotle says that because music imitates emotion, it can affect the character. He points out that music can imitate either well-ordered or disordered emotions. It is effective in leading us towards moral virtue because in moving us emotionally, it is able to, quote, habituate us to true pleasures. He says that the pleasure we naturally find in music can lead us to enjoy good emotional dispositions. And here's a little excerpt from Aristotle. Since then, music is a pleasure, and virtue consists in rejoicing and loving and hating all aright. There is clearly nothing which we are so much concerned to acquire and to cultivate as the power of forming right judgments and of taking delight in good dispositions and noble actions. Wow, that's an important thing. Being able to, let's see, let me just read that again. Since then, music is a pleasure and a virtue, and virtue consists in rejoicing and loving and hating aright. There is clearly nothing which we are so much concerned to acquire and to cultivate as the power of forming right judgments and of taking delight in good dispositions and noble actions. So I think we were talking about this last week, just the idea of following the beautiful path, because when you're trying to find this beautiful path, when you're looking always for beauty, when you go out for a walk and you're rather than being like in the crazy chaoticness perhaps of your mind, you can step out and just acknowledge the beauty that is around you, the trees, the leaves, the plants, the bugs, the grass, the day, the clouds, the sunshine, if it's warm, if it's cold, the breeze, whatever it is. For example, I would describe that as somebody that's on the beautiful path. They look for beauty around them. They have, since they're on that beautiful path, they probably want to have beautiful things going on in their mind. They have the ability to discern what is beautiful to them mentally. So having your mental garden flourishing in beautiful thoughts, and then also beautifying your space, beautifying the relationships in your life, having just being on that beautiful path. And it's interesting how music is an audible version of beauty. You can hear ugliness, you can hear beautifulness, you can hear all these range of emotions. And just it's like, I think that's one of the things that they're talking about. It seems like when they're talking about how music can teach us about virtue and about well ordered or disordered emotions. I just think that's such an interesting side note. So I'm going to read that again. Since then, music is a pleasure, and virtue consists in rejoicing and loving and hating aright. There is clearly nothing which we are so much concerned to acquire and to cultivate as the power of forming right judgments and of taking delight in good dispositions and noble actions. And of course, we have to we have to experience the other side of that to know if we're on the noble path or the good path or the bad path. So just because you're on the beautiful path or you love beauty doesn't mean that you're not going to experience like the ugliness of life sometimes, and to make the wrong decisions and to be with the wrong people and all of that kind of thing. It doesn't, shield you from that, but I think just we learn through contrast, don't we? That's just literally how I have to learn, unfortunately, is I have to just like, I'm trying to stay somewhere and then this way happens and then this way happens and then this way happens. But then if you have this somewhat of a compass where you're like, wow, I'm like way over here and this does not feel right. It can help you to figure out what does feel right just by following that little voice that's like, no, this is not right. And then it'll like bring you back to maybe where you might want to be. And then when you're there, you are so happy that you've experienced all these things. And music shows us that too. The concept of harmony, the one, like being on that drone, the one. And then as the scale kind of gets further and further and further and further and further away from that one, there's 7 notes in the scale. When you're at that seventh note, you're really far from the one. And it's quite dissonant, but it's really close, interestingly, to the resolution, going back to the one. So there's just all these like kind of things we could contemplate with music as a really deep art, rather than just trying to make a sound beautiful, or to do a bowing correctly, or to play in tune. There's just all these layers to music and the meaning behind it that is just fun to think about. Okay, little sip of this sparkling water here. Are you guys enjoying? Are you guys enjoying this series? I just love, you know, I just love the ancient Greek so much. Okay. According to Aristotle, emotions are good or bad as they are well ordered. Or, oh, Danny, I'm so happy that you're here. So happy. And Michael. Okay. According to Aristotle, emotions are good or bad as they are well. Let's see. Let me just read that again. According to Aristotle, emotions are good or bad as they are well ordered or badly ordered. A good emotion is properly measured. A bad emotion is either excessive or deficient in a given circumstance. It is reason which determines whether or not an emotion is well ordered. Reason, interesting. I just lost where I was. I'm having a blonde moment, you guys. Um, from what Aristotle says about the emotions, we can conclude that for him, music will be good or bad according to whether it moves us in a well ordered or disordered way. Through the pleasure it gives the listener in different types of emotional movement, music can dispose him to enjoy well ordered or disordered emotions. If music familiarizes the listener with balanced emotional movements, it fosters virtue in him. On the other hand, if it familiarizes him with excessive or deficient emotional movements by stirring him up or calming him down too much, it prepares the ground for vice. As Aristotle says, quote, the habit of feeling pleasure and pain at mere representations is not for removed from the same feeling about the realities. I think there might be a typo in there. This is especially true of musical imitations which, quote, hardly fall short of the actual affections. I had a hard time following that. I'm sorry, you guys. Let's keep going. It is evident from what Aristotle says about both music and virtue that music only disposes towards moral virtue and does not give this virtue directly. In defining moral virtue, he says that it entails the right choice of what is appropriate according to reason. In saying that music is an imitation of emotion, he implies that music can only directly move someone in an emotional way. Music cannot directly touch reason. Since music does not touch reason directly, it cannot give knowledge of, but only familiarity with, well ordered emotions. In this way, it disposes the listener towards virtue, but does not make him virtuous. That's interesting. Let's just think about that for a second. So imagine that you listened to Mozart's symphonies all day, or you listened to just anything that came out of Mozart's mind for the entire day. Um, it's Jay Swad. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. um, imagine that and you could even say, imagine that you like grew up as a child listening to Mozart, or grew up as a child listening to classical music. Does it make you a good person because you listen to that versus listening to some other kind of music? Maybe it just kind of gives you a slightly different kind of disposition, but it doesn't necessarily make you good or bad. But your ability to choose the right thing makes you, a good or bad person. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. Okay. Let's just keep going. I'm going to just keep reading this. Um, let's see, where was I? me just read that last little sentence again. Since music does not touch reason directly, it cannot give knowledge of, but only familiarity with well-ordered emotions. In this way, it disposes the listener towards virtue, but does not make him virtuous. Okay. After establishing that being pleased and pained by imitations is very close to having the same feelings for the realities, and after showing that music imitates emotion, Aristotle concludes, quote, enough has been said to show that music has a power of forming the character and should therefore be introduced into the education of the young. Music, then, should be included in education because one of its ends is disposing towards moral virtue. Giving intellectual enjoyment is the last reason which Aristotle mentions for training a child in music. This is why music was traditionally included in education. Quote, it is clear that there are branches of learning and education which we must study merely with a view to leisure spent in intellectual activity, and these are to be valued for their own sake. There remains, then, the use of music for intellectual enjoyment in leisure, which is in fact evidently the reason of its introduction, this being one of the ways in which it is thought that a free man should pass his leisure. It's also this time of creativity, of thinking in a completely different way than we might think most of the time of the day. We're in like creative mode, where if you allow yourself to be in creative mode and you can tap out of being like, just trying to, uh, make this in tune, make this correct, and like all of that kind of thing. Of course, we need that. But if you can also tap in simultaneously to the creative side of creating music, of creating sounds, like hearing what kind of sound are you making? Is it a happy sound? Is it a sad sound? What does this bowing do? What does this rhythm do? What do these notes like make? What is the feeling behind those? It's just such a different way of thinking than we think most of the time. And so it's almost like this, um, well, I won't get too out there. It's just a thing that I think is important for us as a human to think about. We have to tap into our creative side as well as our, pragmatic side, but also our creative side. There's a lot of joy in creativity. And I think that's one of the reasons why um, I'm just, I have, like, it almost seems like I have unlimited energy to teach all day because I am teaching all day. But I'm just as happy and energetic as I am at, 1 p.m. as I am at 9 p.m. for my lessons. Because it's just so fun to have this creative time to explore music with all these different, individuals, and it's just amazing. So anyway, if you are feeling down, consider doing something creative to tap into your own ability to be creative, whether it's painting, whether it's writing, whether it's scribbling and drawing, or whatever it is. Okay, Aristotle objects to children studying music since intellectual enjoyment is noble and suited to the perfection found in men rather than to the imperfection found in children. That's interesting. Well, then that's weird because he was just talking about how it was important in education, but maybe it's, a later on education. A lot of my students are adults or retired. I have a few little baby ones. Um, and, traditionally we do study music at a young age, but a lot of my students are people in their professions and they're trying to find something creative to do besides just, be at work all day. They want to add an art to their life. All right, so the objection of of children studying music rather than having in favor of having adults study music, this objection throws some light on the nature of this end of music. Aristotle explains that the pleasure that comes with the intellectual enjoyment of music is noble because it entails delight in noble music. Music can be called noble to the extent that it induces a well-ordered emotional state in the listener and brings him the kind of pleasure that the virtuous man feels. But Aristotle indicates that music can bring noble pleasure in another way as well. The second kind of pleasure is noble because it is tied to an intellectual enjoyment of music. Men do not find intellectual enjoyment in merely feeling and enjoying well ordered emotional movements. Intellectual enjoyment comes from contemplating the emotional order imitated by music. When our emotions are well ordered by music, we feel good. But men not only enjoy feeling, they also enjoy knowing. As Aristotle points out at the beginning of the Metaphysics, that's one of his books, I guess, or his writings, quote, all men by nature desire to know, end quote, and knowing involves seeing order. Music gives intellectual enjoyment because in it there is an order which men like to consider. Why don't we go through this page and then we'll wrap up for today, but I think this is quite interesting. So, since music is fundamentally an imitation of emotion, this order will be aesthetic in the etymological sense of the term and not mathematical. Aesthetic, does that mean beauty? I have to probably look that up. As Aristotle says, numbers do not move us. When mathematical proportions change, we are not altered. On the other hand, musical harmony makes us bend with its fluctuations. Our emotions rise and fall with the music, just as sound that leaves us indifferent and unmoved is not musical for Aristotle. Like, oh, that's like what I was talking about, like with the jackhammer or just with like background noise, just as sound that leaves us indifferent and unmoved is not musical for Aristotle. So the mathematical beauty of harmonic progressions will not be the measure of the enjoyment given by a piece. Rather, for Aristotle, the intellectual enjoyment of music will be based on the contemplation of the proportion between the development in a musical imitation and the emotion itself. When listening to music, a man can enjoy seeing the relation which exists between an emotion and its imitation. As Aristotle says, it is natural for man to be delighted by imitations because this delight is founded on their natural desire to know. This natural enjoyment of imitations through melody is, according to Aristotle, not only at the root of our enjoyment of music, but also the source of musical creation itself. When music establishes a suitable emotional order in the listener, it can bring enjoyment beyond that found in other imitations. Not only will a man be pleased by seeing the relation between the imitation and the reality, but he will also delight in contemplating the suitability of the emotion imitated. He has added pleasure in realizing that he is being moved in a way which is in tune with the feelings of a virtuous man. Intellectually enjoying music requires experience and understanding both to recognize imitations and to appreciate an appropriate emotional order when it is created. Music can move children in a well ordered way, but they can only be pleased with this order. They cannot understand why this order is good. This is why Aristotle says that the intellectual enjoyment of music is beyond the grasp of children. Musical education can only prepare children for the intellectual enjoyment they will have when grown up. This delight proper to well-educated adults is the fourth end that Aristotle gives for music. I think we're going to end there. And I think I'm probably comprehending like this much of what all the layers and depth of what they're talking about. I don't know if you guys, or do you have any thoughts about this at all? I think it's just really dense to understand all of this, maybe. Um, but I think it's just interesting to contemplate the ancient view of music and to just be aware. I think the biggest thing that I've learned from reading this article is just that there's something that's so comforting to me as a musician that it's not about being the ancients didn't say that the best musicians and the best artists were the best technical people on their instrument. That is an amazing component that should be respected, but it's not the end of music. Like that's not the ultimate end of music, is not to be the flashiest, most showing off like person on your instrument. That's like completely on the extreme, like losing the point of music side. And I think that's why when I graduated from my master's program, I was just like so um I was really upset because and I'm very lost feeling because I just felt like I graduated and I was like, well, I just really don't want to listen to anybody sit on stage and show off. It was all about like, this person played this note wrong and this bowing wrong and they like, messed this up or whatever it is. Um, and that's just not the point of music. And I actually went through a long time where I just felt like I could not listen to music. Didn't want to listen to any violin concertos, didn't want to listen to any viola concertos, didn't want to listen to an orchestra, didn't want to listen, literally did not want to listen to any music. And I think I went through this period where I just listened to podcasts. I wanted to listen to people's thoughts about things. And I think it's just because I was viewing everything through this one lens, which was like music is just about being like technically like super amazing on your instrument. And I'm like, well, I just don't fall into that category. So I must be like a crappy musician. And I just like don't want to listen to music because it makes me feel crappy about myself. But that's just an extreme side of the spectrum. And I love the idea that the ancient Greeks talk about the greatest musician will actually make you feel something. So, um, and it's like the sound healing component to that is like so amazing. The fact that, and I think that's one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the harp and drawn to this drum, is that, well, first of all, the drum is such an easy instrument, and you can just sit there and experience the sound of the drum plus a rhythm. And to let that be like affect your body, which is an instrument as well, is just so amazing. It's a fundamental way of experiencing sound healing. And I love singing bowls as well. That's another, I have like two singing bowls. There's like, I really want a great big singing bowl that you can stand in. And at some point, my idea is to have everybody come for their lesson. I'll just have them stand in the singing bowl and just be like, hit the singing bowl and it just vibrates all of the, stuff out of you that needs to get out of you. I mean, it's amazing how sound really, really affects us as a human. I mean, this drum, when I play this drum, it hits me right here. It's not really hitting me in my fingers, like in my feet or anywhere. There's like a particular area of my body that like responds to the sound of the drum. And instruments do that too. If you were to play, if the cello, for example, was to play like a C, and I was to put my instrument next to that, my instrument would be vibrating. Or if I was to just like, if you put violins together and one of them's being played and the other one's nearby, it's going to vibrate along with it, even without being played. And apparently, you can do that same thing with tuning forks. If you have like 10 tuning forks and one of them you play, the other, and you put it next to them, it's going to vibrate along with them because they're the same, especially if only if it's the same frequency, like the exact same frequency. So there's this whole layer of sound healing. And then on top of that, if you understand that, this like richness and depth that music has, when you listen to a symphony or when you listen to a concerto or when you listen to Bach or something, it's just so much more meaningful to be able to play something like that. It's just like this really special skill to be able to play something like that and to be able to hear and be affected by the harmonies and rhythms of those works of art, that for whatever reason are really venerated by our society. If you know that, you know why. It's so much more beyond just the virtuosity of being able to do that. So I'm sure you guys, you can agree and you feel the same way. So, anyway, that is um, the crazy sayings of me for this week, and it's just fun to explore music and be on this journey. And it's fun to explore music through other instruments as well. So if you play one instrument, I would say encourage you to grab another one to learn about music on as well. Something that's fundamental and like a drum or a harp or a flute or like an ancient instrument too, because the ancient music was so simple, and its function was like so just like it's just so easy. So, but like really deep. So it's neat to explore that basis. There's this saying that you need to know where you came from so that you know where you are, so that you know where you're going. So that's why we're kind of on this little journey. So anyways, you guys, um, how are you doing in the chat? Have you been babbling to each other? Michael, you and your violin viola collection, that is so cool. So, so cool. I wonder if there's anything else that I wanted to show you today. I'm so excited that you thank you for all of you that participated in that little poll that I posted the other day about the studio circle. So that's going to be a new little tier that I add to the Patreon group. Right now on Patreon, there's just it's $1 to subscribe to that, and it's one mini lesson that I post each Wednesday. And right now we're going through the scales. So each week, well, at the beginning of the month, really, there's a lesson on the major and minor scale that we're going to be studying. And then I give you a little sound recording of the scale to play along with it and to explore the harmony and things like that. And I actually posted the C scale live on YouTube. So that's what that was on Wednesday. The recording of the C scale with the cello drone. Excuse me, I told you, I told you this would make me burp. So, but on Patreon, we're kind of like a month ahead of what's going to be happening on YouTube as far as the scales and drones and recordings go. But I'm going to add another tier to the Patreon community for those of you out there that would like to connect with the studio a bit more, because um, I am so blessed. I have a lot of students, and I'd love for them all to be able to share and play for each other, and just like talk about what they're struggling with, what they're trying to work on, play a little portion of something a little technical and something musical for the group, and just kind of get some feedback. And it also gives you a little bit of encouragement to maybe practice, because you have knowing that at the end of the month we'll have this opportunity to play for each other will be awesome. But I'd like to include the Patreon group to that as well. So that's going to be also open starting it sometime in July for the Patreon community to join the studio circles via Zoom, which will be recorded, and you'll be able to watch it back on Patreon. But I think that will be fun, just kind of give us more of a sense of community together. And yeah, so that will be the next little thing. So if you're not on Patreon already, please go there. It's it's patreon.com/violin viola masterclass. And just it's $1 to subscribe. So if you're just there, then you're going to get all the updates and everything. If you're interested in all the future things, fun things that are going on there. And I think it'll be neat at when the world was the old world. I um, I was really lucky, and I got to go teach at a music festival in Italy called Interharmony. And I've also invited my studio to go to the Lionel Turtis International Viola Competition. That's on the Isle of Man. We did that in 2018 or 19. I forget what the year was, but anyway, recently. And it's just fun to be able to organize studio things together, whether it's going to an art museum or going on a trip to go to a festival, to go to a competition or whatever it is. And if I have a little platform like Patreon, I can just send you an email and be like, this is what we're planning as a studio trip if you're interested in doing that, you know, and just be able to organize a group, a group thing like that would be really neat. So with that, you guys, I think I'm going to love and leave you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming to our little weekly Friday live streams. I hope you are enjoying them. I'm enjoying them. I'm really learning so much from this time together. Just being able to read through this and just kind of chew on some of these thoughts out loud with you guys is just so awesome. So thank you so much for your presence and for being here. And I will see you. Follow me on Instagram so we can stay connected on Instagram if you'd like. It's Violin Viola Masterclass if you're interested in reaching out. It's violinviolamasterclass.com is my website. Please join the Patreon community so I can easily like connect with you guys and tell you, for those of you that are interested in everything, please do that. And thank you, Krister, and happy solstice on the 21st. That's the time to welcome the light back into your life. It's the longest day. If you read up on, how to celebrate the solstice, there might be some fun things that you can look into to just kind of connect with nature and, the cosmos. It would be so neat. So with that, I'm gonna love and leave you guys. Thank you so, so much for being here. Um, oh my gosh, sorry, one more thought. I had a funny idea that um, because I don't know about you, but do you ever fall asleep with your headphones in listening to something? Well, I was thinking it would be funny for me to just read you this article, but really slowly and boringly so that you fall asleep. But just knowing that you would be reading, having something positive read to you, and just kind of a relaxing thing to drift off into space, into dreamland with. So I was thinking of making a funny like sleep video for you to just read very slowly this article on the ancient Greeks. Thoughts on music. So I think that would probably bore everyone to death and you'd fall asleep instantly. So that might be a funny video that comes out. I don't know. But anyway, you guys, mwah, lots of love. I will see you on Patreon on Wednesday for our little video. That's probably going to be another scale, the A minor scale recording that you can play along with me. And I will see you on our next Friday's live stream. Okay. And for those of you in the studio, I will see you in your lessons. So I'll see you very soon. Okay. Lots of love. Bye bye. Bye bye, you guys. Thank you for being here. You're the best. You're awesome.